Have you ever wanted to draw a realistic dog but just get stuck not knowing where to start? Well, you've come to the right place because today we're going to go through how to draw this dog step by step using your General's charcoals. Let's go through them. First, we've got your General's 557 HB hard, your Primo 59 HB, your Primo 59W, and your General's white 558. You've also got a bristle brush, a Factus eraser, a kneaded eraser, which is also a lot of fun to play with. You're also going to need a sharpener, and this is going to help us keep our pencil tips nice and sharp. Here's the adorable dog we're going to be working on. His name is Ren, and you can see I'm just starting with basic shapes. I'm going to mark the top and bottom of the head, and I'm also going to mark the sides of the head. As I'm placing those marks, I'm picturing exactly where I want this head to be on my page. So I don't want it too close to the top or bottom. I want it to be right about in the middle, and I don't want it to be too large for the paper, too small for the paper. I want to plan this out in advance so that I don't do a whole drawing and then realize, oh, it looks cramped on the page. So keep that in mind as you're placing your marks for where you want the top and bottom of your head to go. Now I'm using comparative measurement here. I'm measuring how high the head is, I'm measuring how wide the head is, and I'm using a really light touch. Think of all of these marks as being temporary marks. We're using straight lines, we're getting a really basic shape, and eventually those marks are either going to be covered up by our drawing or they're going to be erased. So it's really important that we draw them really lightly at this stage. Another reason why we want to keep those lines light is because we always want to question whether they are accurate or not. This is the part where we are working out the drawing. It's most important to get our proportions correct now, and that's going to build a foundation that we can work on later. If our drawing is correct in this stage, then as we're laying on value and tone and placing features, it's going to go much smoother and it's going to end up actually looking like the dog we're trying to draw. So here's where we're questioning and we're moving lines. If those lines seem like they might be in the wrong place, measure again and then move it. It's going to be so much easier if you're using light lines to measure and move those basic shapes than if we start adding detail right away in the wrong spot. You can also see that as I'm going along, I'm using straight lines the whole time. I'm remeasuring and I'm using smaller and smaller measurements. Whereas before I was measuring top of the head to the bottom of the head, one side of the head to the other side of the head. Now I can start breaking down those into smaller measurements, and I can measure from the chin to the mouth to the top of the nose, the eye sockets, etc. We're making those basic shapes break down into smaller shapes now. Once we get our large basic shapes down correctly, we can start blocking in smaller shapes that belong inside of those big shapes. Now take your time on this and go ahead and pause if you're drawing along with me because this video is sped up. The next step is going to be refining our outline. We're only moving on to this step if our basic shapes are correct. And so far I'm happy with these. So now I'm going in and putting in some smaller shapes within those large shapes, and I'm refining some of those lines. So maybe something that was one straight line has an angle break in the middle of it. So I'm going in and putting in that angle break. Still mostly working with straight lines, and that's helping me get these accurate angles and accurate proportions. You can see I'm constantly measuring and constantly comparing different portions of the face to each other to make sure that things are being placed in the right spot. Now, if you're happy with this, it's going to be time to go ahead and place your features. This is an exciting part because your dog really starts looking like your dog. The first thing I'm doing is marking parallel lines here. Bottom of the mouth, nose, and where the eyes sit. And all of those lines are exactly parallel, so the face isn't going to read all wonky. And the features rest inside of those parallel lines. So if your dog's head is facing straight forward, then all of those lines are going to be exactly horizontal. If he's kind of got a tilted head, then you can see they're all going to follow the same angle as well. I use these lines kind of like scaffolding to make sure that I'm placing these features in the correct spot. Eventually, that scaffolding is going to get taken down and we'll be left with the features in the right place. As I'm marking these features, I'm really not going into detail. I'm doing just the basic shapes of those features. I'm not filling in the pupil or starting to add value at all. Now, before we move on to shading, let's study the lighting. If we keep in mind the fact that your dog's head is a three-dimensional form, just like the sphere was that we practiced earlier, we're going to remember that one side of the face is going to be facing the light and one side of the face is going to be in shadow. Being conscious of the three-dimensional forms on your dog are going to help signal us where we can begin shading. I like to begin shading by putting in an even layer of charcoal on the shadow side of his face. If your dog has a long snout or big ears, analyze where the light is hitting those parts of the face that have form. Are they also casting a shadow? At this point, anywhere that is turned away from the light or has the light blocked from it is going to be shaded. Go ahead and start that base tone, which is just an even coverage of charcoal indicating the shadow side of the face. To get an even tone, you will continue applying your charcoal lightly in smooth, even strokes. You can see here that I like to go back and forth at an angle, which often goes against the direction of the fur or hair. This layer has nothing to do with the fur, so you don't have to worry about that yet. I'm creating this even surface to indicate that our dog is three-dimensional first, and then we will eventually lay in that fur texture on top of this. Once you have an even tone down, continue darkening by adding layers, changing your stroke directions. This will help you even out the tone and get a deeper value. You can also expand to other dark areas of the fur that might be facing the light, but the local color is very dark. So for example, this is a black dog. There's a lot of areas on the light side of the face that are still very dark in value. If you have sections that look patchy or uneven, you can go in with a kneaded eraser to gently lighten it to match the surrounding tone. At this point, I'm going to keep adding layers, and since he has black fur, gradually I'll be covering the majority of my dog with some amount of charcoal. I'm only avoiding the areas of white fur, which we will get to later. If you get a bit of charcoal in an area that will be white fur or have a light value, it shouldn't be a big deal because we're still using such a light touch as we apply our strokes. If you keep that light pressure, you should be able to erase those strokes when you need to. Applying these layers lightly keeps our options open because we can adjust them, and this will be especially important when we're turning this into a fur texture. So if you impatiently just begin pressing hard with your charcoal to darken it, you won't be able to erase it back to a lighter value later on. The fur texture will be harder to achieve, and you won't be able to adjust it as you need. So I hope I've made a fair argument for slow and steady. Pause this video if you're drawing along and take your time with layering up. The next thing we will be doing is expanding our value range by using a softer charcoal, or Primo HB. This charcoal is one of my favorites because it's still hard enough to be able to sharpen to a nice point and give us a lot of control, but it's soft enough to easily apply a darker value to our paper. I'm going to try to go in and gently apply a layer with my Primo on the parts of the dog's face that are darker, and this should line up with the shadow side of the face. Adding this layer is going to expand our value range to have an even darker value. Next, you get to see what this bristle brush is for. I love using this brush to help knock some of that charcoal into the tooth of the paper. And when I say tooth of the paper, I mean the texture of the paper. So when you're applying charcoal, you can see that the charcoal sits on the ridges of the paper that are higher and leaves areas that are lower without charcoal. By switching stroke direction using a sharp pencil, we can help fill some of those gaps, but we can also fill those remaining gaps with a bristle brush. The brush helps reduce the noise, but I love it because it doesn't wipe out the beauty of your pencil strokes. So when people use a pencil stump or a paper towel or even their fingers to smooth out their charcoal, it can totally destroy the beauty of the strokes that you applied, and it can make it either totally blended or streaky. I love seeing the pencil strokes and being reminded of the hand of the artist who created the drawing. You can see how I'm lightly sweeping it across the page, and slowly that noise, that kind of like staticky look, is going down, but you can still see my pencil strokes. To me, that is just chef's kiss. Now I'm going in with my kneaded eraser to clean up the areas of my paper that might have a bit of dark charcoal dust on them. I don't want that to mix at all when I'm applying the white charcoal to the page. You can go ahead and grab your General's White 558 charcoal. We're going to further expand our value range by establishing a lighter value now. This gray paper is so fun to work on because you get to apply both light and dark to it, and you use the medium value of the paper to bridge the two. You can see as I begin applying, I'm using the same technique that I already used in the darks. Smooth, even tone, not going in the direction of the fur, and getting an even coverage. I'm then going to switch and do strokes in a different direction, except that this time as we're layering, our value is getting lighter rather than darker. In the next part of this video, you'll sometimes see this stick laying across my drawing, and that's just my cane, which I use as a maul stick. It's something that I can rest my hand on to get more precise strokes without resting my hand on the paper. The oils in your hand can actually transfer to your paper and ruin it over time, so I want to be extra careful about that. Also, if you're resting your hand on your paper, you can end up smudging your drawing, which you don't want to do, and this maul stick is perfect for helping you avoid that. Our next step is to choose our fur strategy. You can refer back to the booklet and videos where I have several examples of different fur types and how I personally approach them. Or, if you're drawing Run With Me, you can see how I'll be drawing his fur. He's got a combo of long dark fur, long white fur, and medium length dark and light fur. And this is great because it means we will be utilizing all 4 of the pencils in our kit as we do this fur. We have great form established already because we applied the base values that indicate a light and dark side to his face, and the texture of the fur is going to be sitting on top of that form. Now, looking at your reference is going to be really important in this step. If you're drawing along using your General's kit, flip to the page of the booklet that has the Wren reference and take a look at the directions that the fur is growing. If you're drawing your own dog, take note of your dog's own fur patterns and the way it lays. Since Wren's hair is mostly long and straight, but that will still have a soft curve to it, I'll be using long sweeping strokes. I use a combo of pulling the pencil along in the direction the hair is growing and pushing the pencil in the opposite direction back towards the root. This combo will give the illusion of hair. My aim here is not to draw every individual hair, but the illusion of fur overall. If I get bogged down drawing every hair, it has the potential to become too distracting. So think back to when we had that basic envelope shape. Those lines were really important as we found the structure of her face and the proportions of it. But now it's time that those lines kind of disappear. They can either disappear into the background or they can get covered up by your pencil strokes here. We want those lines turned into more natural and organic shapes of fur, not the rigid structure we use to mark proportions. You can do this with your kneaded eraser, or you can overlap those lines. Some of these areas will get extra attention with flyaway hairs, and some of these areas can softly fade into the background. These are choices that you get to make as the artist. We like to call these artistic liberties, when you get to make decisions about how your art looks, not just stay married to exactly what your reference is. Your reference is going to be great for figuring out the directionality of your hair and fur, but don't feel like you have to keep everything exactly the same. If you're drawing along, go ahead and pause here so that you can take some time to work on your fur. Don't be fooled thinking that I'm working fast because this is sped up to about 50 times speed. Take your time, turn on some music, and enjoy the process. Let's chat about working on white areas. These areas can be so much fun to work on once you flip a switch in your brain. Before, when we were working on the dark sections, every layer added made the value darker, and every part you erased made it lighter. Now, every layer is going to make the value lighter, and any parts you erase will be darker. I'm laying in fur in the direction that it's growing, not making the strokes too bold, but enough to imply the fur texture. I can then go in with my kneaded eraser or my sharpened pen eraser to pull out darker areas of the fur. As I apply the white to these fur sections, I'm remembering to match the fur's length with these strokes. So on his muzzle here, we've got some short strokes, and on his chest, I'm doing longer pencil strokes. I'm taking some time here to add more shading to the inside of the mouth. There's not a lot of light getting in here, so we can darken that area and keep the tone smooth to imply that depth. When I use my pen eraser, I always make sure it's sharp by cutting it at an angle with an X-Acto knife. I can then pull it across these sections in a similar way to how I was applying my pencil strokes. You can see these long sweeping motions for that chest hair.
For me, the trickiest part of white fur is when there's a darker area that's just slightly darker than the gray of the paper. So that means I can't just pull it out with my eraser, but I actually have to go in with the HB charcoal. Here you can see I'm going in with a few strokes of my HB charcoal to add that section, but I will be tweaking it throughout this whole drawing, just trying to get it right without standing out too much. From our widest areas to our darkest, remember that as you're adding this fur texture on top of the areas you've previously shaded, we want to keep our value hierarchy the same. So areas that were our darkest areas before have to remain the darkest darks. As we've been adding layers that follow the direction of the fur growth, we've gradually darkened our midtones, so we need to go in and further darken our shadow side of the face as well. I'm going to use the Primo HB pencil for this. As I'm going along shading, I'm consciously trying not to make too many areas that stand out and compete for our eye's attention. If it begins to look like too many hairs, too many details, or lines are sticking out too much, you can knock back some of those details with your brush. I'll also be adding little punches of dark in areas like the nose, eyes, and mouth. I'm also wanting to use this darker pencil to help me redefine some of the shapes of the head that were lost during all that layering. You can see here I'm now bridging the light to shadow side of the face and not making it such a significant jump. We just go back and forth until it reads like a three-dimensional form. Sometimes it means darkening an area and sometimes it means lightening one. Sometimes it means bridging the two like I'm doing here. Just like in the dark sections, when I had an area that wasn't blending in well with others or was sticking out too much and pulling too much attention away, I settled those areas down with my brush, and I'm going to do that here too. I use a completely separate brush for my white areas. You don't want to use the same brush or you risk mixing the black and white charcoal, which will end up looking a bit murky and dull the bright whites that you've established. Here you can see me stitching the black and white fur together. A dog's fur isn't going to have a straight line boundary between the two. This is a natural, organic shape, and there will be plenty of overlap between the two. I use deliberate strokes of my Primo white that go from the white fur into the black fur. The Primo white is the harder of the two whites, so I use it when I don't want the marks mixing, and I don't anticipate needing to erase them. Here, I'm slightly rotating the pencil to make sure that the tip is clean and isn't dragging any black charcoal into the white section or mixing the two. These strokes start in the white fur, go into the black, and then become less and less. Make sure based on your reference, you're pulling those hairs in the right direction. You also want to confirm with your reference if you should be pulling long strokes or doing shorter ones like in the muzzle area on this dog. When I finish with these white strokes, I will use a HB charcoal to stitch a few darker hairs in with the white fur. It's kind of a back and forth dance at this point. Here's a close-up of what I'm doing as I'm stitching this fur together. You can see that the white overlaps into the black fur and the black overlaps into the white fur, but the two are not mixing. It's not a rigid line or a hard and fast boundary. Let's take some time to work out those details. Your kneaded eraser is going to be one of your best friends as we're doing this. You can use that to pull out individual hairs, you can do that to lighten sections, you can use it to mark in little details, like here where I'm using it to pull out a few hairs that are going in the opposite direction of the rest of the fur. And you're also going to be using very sharp HB, Primo HB, white, and Primo white pencils to help you bring out a few details and fill in the tooth of the paper. Those sharp pencils are going to be the best tools you have for creating controlled, precise marks on your paper. If you're struggling to keep those pencils sharpened, something I do is to have a big stack of pencils with fresh tips next to me. That means I don't have to keep stopping over and over to use my sharpener. I can keep in the drawing flow without interruption. If, however, you don't have handfuls of pencils at your home, then you can use that time that you spend sharpening your pencil as a little brain break. You can take a step back and evaluate how your drawing is looking from a distance, which gives you a fresh perspective on how it's coming along. When you step back, it alerts your brain to the things that you've been ignoring or unable to see up close. So that's what happened to me when I stepped back and reevaluated the overall shape and design of the right side of the dog that I was including. You can see I wasn't completely happy with how my drawing was looking, so I decided to put a bit more dark underneath the white of his chest, thinking this would help with my design. And I went with this plan for quite a while. You'll see I changed my mind again later. So let that also be a reminder to you, it's never too late to fix something. We don't have to settle with the marks that are on the paper. If they need to be adjusted, don't be afraid to make that move. Up to this point, we've deliberately been using a light touch with our pencil strokes, which keeps our drawing malleable. We can still erase those lines and make the necessary adjustments. So, whether you're stepping away from the easel to sharpen your pencils or you have a stack next to you, do be sure to give yourself breaks to step away and evaluate your drawing. Look at it and analyze. What are the places that need more detail? What are the places that the details need to be knocked back some? What's competing for my eye's attention? And where do we want the viewer's eye to actually be drawn to and settle on? As you answer these questions for yourself, that's going to direct you in the areas that you need to push those details and pull them back. One area that's great for pushing details to create texture is the nose. I love working on dogs' noses. We've already made it into a three-dimensional shape with the general light side and shadow side, but now it's time to help it look like the wet texture of a dog's nose. So this is achieved by adding in some of your brightest white highlights on top of the dark nose. These are actually reflected lights bouncing off of a glossy surface in the shape of the light source, and these are called spectral highlights. They make a dog's nose look shiny. These reflected lights sit on top of the dark nose, so the light and dark are in close proximity to each other. That's different than when we're doing form, shadows, and highlights with a gradual shift in value. Here, you can see that the shine is on top of his nose, and I also have a few wet highlights shining at me below his nostril. You can see I'm able to add those highlights to the eyes as well, which gives them that same glossy look. The way we draw these highlights is by first erasing any dark charcoal powder that might be in the area, either with a kneaded eraser or a pen eraser, and then pop in the highlight with your General's white and then a layer of Primo white. This will give you a bright white that isn't dulled by accidentally mixing it in with the black charcoal and turning the area into like a murky gray. Now that we've gotten to a great point with our dog, let's talk about our whiskers. You're going to use your white General's charcoal and a mahl stick, which is going to help steady your hand. These lines are ones that I prepare for. I do air whiskers as I'm getting ready to mark them. I know exactly what direction I want them to go. I know how long I want them to be, and I've practiced them in the air before I go ahead and mark them down. Some common mistakes that people make when they're doing their whiskers are using dull pencils, using parallel lines. Their lines are too straight. They might be the same value or they might be the same size. And really, whiskers are an organic thing. You need to remember that these are going to be curved lines. They're not always the same value, which means some areas are going to be lighter, some areas are going to be darker. And that's because these are curved lines. So different areas of the hair are going to reflect the light back differently to you. Some areas are facing the light and others are curving away. So I use both my General's white and my Primo white in order to achieve the different values of the whiskers. First, I like to go in with this General's white to get the initial lines of my whiskers. And then I'll go in with that Primo white and really hammer in some of the brightest spots on those whiskers. Not every whisker gets a bright spot on it either. You've got to remember you can't treat them all the same. There's going to be some that stand out more than others. Remember, whiskers are also all different sizes, so look at your reference and see which ones are longer and where there might be little bitty whiskers. Rin has a bunch of small ones as he gets closer to his mouth. Normally, whiskers come as my last step, and there aren't any major adjustments after that. However, the very last thing that you should be doing is stepping back and looking at your drawing. If that drawing is not working, then I encourage you to take a look and figure out what it is that isn't working about it. You can see here that I took a step back and I really didn't like the layout. I didn't like how the design was working, and I felt like there was too much of like a V shape with Ren. So I went in and decided to change that design. Now, that was a big decision and I did not take it lightly, but I decided it was going to be worth changing it up. So when I stepped back, I decided that I wanted to change the overall shape that I was drawing. So rather than leaving out the entirety of his shoulder area, I wanted to go ahead and draw it in with a slightly different angle than what my photo reference was showing me. I also knew that I needed to go in with some erasing with that dark area under the white part of his chest. Fortunately, I was using a light hand and just doing multiple layers of charcoal, so that really set me up for success in still being able to pull back using my kneaded eraser and my pen eraser. It's never too late to own up to your mistakes or to choose to adjust. I'm not necessarily saying that my initial design choice was a mistake, but it's definitely one that I wanted to change, so here I am changing it. In the end, I was much happier with how this looked. So there's another reminder to you to take a step back as you're working and see how you're liking your drawing, and then make adjustments as you go.
And here is the final stroke. I hope you enjoyed drawing your pet portrait as much as I enjoyed creating it with you. Thank you so much for following along. I hope this is just the beginning of many pet portraits for you. Keep drawing, keep practicing, and most importantly, have fun. Be sure to check out our other generals drawing videos for more tips, techniques, and inspiration.